Welcome to MCJ Report, ladies and gentlemen. On tonight's show, we have a special guest. We will be joined by Senator Malcolm Roberts. That's right. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Malcolm. He has been a huge voice in favor of freedom since the inception of this corona situation, and he has pulled no punches criticizing the government for their handling of this corona situation. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so happy and proud to present to you Senator Malcolm Roberts. So without further ado, let's get to the interview. All right, we are joined by Senator Malcolm Roberts. So first of all, Malcolm, welcome to MCJ Report, and let's just get stuck straight into it. Now, we're seeing some scenes on the streets of Melbourne today. Thousands of people making their voices heard in regards to the mandates and other health directions that we've seen all over the country. And one of the questions from the people that I've been able to ascertain is where has the oversight been in terms of drafting these directions? It appears to me, I could be wrong, that these health orders are essentially orchestrated at the top of government, and there seems to be little debate, especially from opposing experts. So what's your view on that, and would you mind talking about that a little bit?
I don't mind at all, Morgan. They're a control. They're apparatus for control. That's all they are. They're not based on science. They're capricious. They're drawn up on the spur of the moment. They contradict each other, not only between states, but even within individual states over time. They contradict each other. They certainly contradict the federal government. The contradictions within each government, the contradictions between each state government, the contradictions between states and federal is a clear indication that there is no understanding, there's no plan, there's no desire to solve this, there's no data that they're basing it on. It's capricious and it's contradictory and it's very, very damaging. It's a control method, that's all it is. It's just a means of controlling people. No logic at all behind it.
Okay, interesting. Now,
And very damaging too, Morgan, because you know, you've got kids not getting the sun, you've got people not interacting, and that's fundamental to humans. We love to interact. We're social beings. We like to belong to a group. There are so many other symbols like masks. Masks are a form of conditioning. When we go outside, we see people in masks that reminds us of the fear we're supposed to be in. You know, there's so much exaggeration. There's so much hype. There's so many lies. They're conditioning people, they're controlling people, and that's what it is, and they're suppressing people.
Thank you for that insight. And something else that I've noticed, and maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't, but when I look throughout our country and I look at the various chief health officers that are operating throughout the states here in Australia, I tend not to see a great diversity in advice. So why do you think that is?
Well, I disagree with you to some extent. There has been an enormous diversity of advice in many areas, but also a desire to copy each other. I think because they're ignorant, they don't know what the hell they're doing. That's quite clear. They're capricious, as I said. They're contradictory over time and between states and between jurisdictions. And I think it's because they just don't know what they're doing, and they're telling lies, most of them. Because their intent is not to protect people's health. Their intent is to control people, to set up a control regime. That's all they're doing.
Okay, interesting. Well, I've witnessed firsthand experts who hold opposing views essentially shut down. For example, we had a doctor's petition here in Melbourne, but beyond that, we see the Great Barrington Declaration signed by nearly 50,000 medical experts and scientific researchers around the world in relation to the harm of lockdowns versus the risk of COVID-19. We the people have been screaming from the rooftops, and we've been completely ignored. Now, I and a lot of people, we thought the role of politicians was to listen to the people and take their concerns seriously, but we've seen these concerns completely discarded. That's my interpretation. Is there something you'd like to comment on that?
I comment that I agree with you entirely. What COVID showed us in March 2020, when it arrived, and we first started dealing with it, was that we laid bare our vulnerability, our dependence on foreign entities, our inability to manufacture enough goods for ourselves. We have abandoned our country, we have destroyed our sovereignty, we have ceded our sovereignty, destroyed our governance, and it has been pathetically mismanaged now for many, many decades. The second thing we've learned from COVID is in the last 18 months, it has confirmed the mismanagement of our governments. They have been atrocious. There is no plan. There is just a fake plan. What do they call it? A roadmap these days. That's the latest buzzword, a roadmap. With a plan, you must have 5 W's. What are we going to do? Why are we going to do it? Who's going to be in charge and held responsible? Where is it going to happen? And when is it going to happen? And then, and only then, do you ask the question, how is it going to happen? All of those points, the 5 W's and the 1 H, need to be in a plan. We have not seen anything like that at all from any state or federal government. And in fact, we've seen the reverse. We've seen the Chief Health Officer in Queensland, Dr. Jeanette Young, stand up and say, to her credit, I am only responsible for people's physical health. So who the hell is looking after people's mental health? Who the hell is looking after the economic health of the state? And therefore, who's managing the state? Everything the state premier, Anastasia Palaszczuk, just pushes Jeanette Young out the front, hides behind her and says, we've got to do this for health reasons. And we're not managing the state. To manage the future health, even to manage the present health, we have to manage our economy. That's not happening. And then another piece of empirical data you can look at is Taiwan. Taiwan has 24 million people. Australia has 25. Taiwan has a tiny island in which those 24 million people are squeezed. We have a massive continent, the biggest island in the world, the smallest continent, much, much bigger in area. So Taiwan's population is much more concentrated, so the virus can spread more easily. Not only that, Taiwan got the virus earlier, and they have many more interactions with their communist Chinese counterparts. And so there's a much bigger threat over there. Taiwan, up until a massive breakdown in one of their quarantine areas, which they very quickly recovered, I might add. Taiwan, up until about 6 months ago, had 7 fatalities. We had over 900. But the other startling figure about Taiwan is that they did not lock down. They kept their economy bubbling along, and they had a very slight decrease in their economy because their major customers in North America and Europe went into lockdowns and slumped. Despite their major customers slumping, Taiwan recorded a 0.6% drop in economic activity. That's all. They had no lockdowns until the recent quarantine breach, and then they recovered that quarantine breach very, very quickly and get back on top of it. So Taiwan has got a very good testing system, very good tracing system, and a very good quarantining system. What Taiwan has done is what you do in epidemics, pandemics. You isolate the sick, you isolate the vulnerable, and then you get on with letting everyone get on with their lives, because that is the best way to respond, and Taiwan's shown that by far the best record in the world.
Interesting. And I suppose over in that part of the world, they have some prior experience. We think about SARS and what Taiwan was able to learn from SARS. But we also look back to the inception of this corona situation at the World Trade Organization, essentially refusing to take advice from Taiwan in experienced nature. And of course, back then we didn't know anything. We didn't understand anything about the nature of this virus, how dangerous or not dangerous it is. And yet, here in Australia, whether it's Labor or Liberal, we've seen a complete refusal to acknowledge other nations and basically taking the most extreme measures possible, measures that you'd expect to see in communist China. And there's been very little debate, I would say, between Labor and Liberal about how it's rolled out. We see pretty similar scenes from New South Wales to Victoria. So what do you think that says about the state of democracy in our country and the sort of lockstep in terms of Labor and Liberal thinking?
Well, I agree with you entirely. It says that our parliamentary accountability, Morgan, has been shot. It's been destroyed over many, many decades. What we have now are the two major tired old parties, the Labor Party and the Liberal Party, along with the National Party, just basically having a duopoly. And parliaments at state and federal level are working for the parties and not for the people. Parliament is designed to have oversight of the government. The government is within Parliament, as you know, but the Parliament has oversight of the government and holds it accountable. That is not being done. Now, when we had our first single-day session of the Parliament back in Monday, March 23rd, 2020, to deal with the job seeker program and the other measures the government was bringing in, I stood up in Parliament and I said, we look at Italy, Spain, France, China, and we see reportedly tens of thousands of deaths. So reportedly. But anyway, let's assume that the reports are correct and they all died from COVID, not just with COVID. We must do something. Now, you're the elected government for the day, so get on with the job. We gave them an open check. But I said to them, we expect you to come back with the data. We expect you to come back with a plan, and we will hold you accountable. And I said, by the way, have a look at Taiwan. And by the way, have a look at Monash University, where they're having promising in vitro trials with a very well-known medicine. I won't mention its name because you might get banned. I mean, such is the threat these days. So no one's looked at Taiwan, but not only that, you mentioned World Trade Organization. I think you meant World Health Organization.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
The World Health Organization caused this panic, this virus to be turned loose and get a runaway on the Western world, because the World Health Organization back in I think about November 2019, maybe even as early as October, denied its existence. Then it denied that it was any human-to-human transmission. Nothing to worry about here. And then the World Health Organization has suppressed news of Taiwan and won't let people learn from that. The World Health Organization and the Chinese Communist Party are together like that. We know that. And the World Health Organization is run by a former terrorist. And so many of the United Nations organizations are just like the World Health Organization, corrupt, incompetent, and dishonest. We can't have people like that leading the response to the world's response to the virus. It's just rubbish, and it's costing people's lives. But even the World Health Organization has admitted that lockdowns are a blunt instrument that should only be used initially to get control of a virus. So there is a place for lockdowns. Not much of a place, as we've seen from North America. The states using lockdowns are doing no better than the states without lockdowns. We can talk more about that in a minute. But the World Health Organization itself has admitted that lockdowns are for use only initially to get control of a virus. So every time a state government in this country invokes a lockdown, they are saying, we have not got control of this virus. After 18 months, that is deplorable that they're still relying on that. Now, in Senate estimates, I checked with the Chief Medical Officer for the federal government and the Secretary of the Federal Health Department. And I said, I've got a list of strategies, 7 strategies here that I would like to test with you to get your confirmation or changes. And I went through the list of 7 strategies. And I said, are they would they be the proper strategies for putting into a plan for managing the virus properly? And they said yes. And I said, is there anything missing? Should there be an 8th or 9th? No, you've got everything. Is there anything that shouldn't be there? No, they should all be there. Of those 7 strategies, the federal government is using 1, and the state governments are using 1, maybe 2. The rest are not being used. If we were using that medicine, and let's talk about that medicine, even though I can't mention it either, I can't mention the full name, that medicine has been given in 3.7 billion doses around the world over 60 years. For other diseases and other conditions, not for COVID. But we know from that, Morgan, that this particular medicine is proven as safe. It has no serious adverse effects, only mild effects in some people, and that's headaches and a bit of nausea. I've taken that medication when I came back from India and picked up a condition over there, and the IVA medicine actually got rid of it immediately, and I had no side effects whatsoever. Now, so the 3 things that are needed for making a very fine medicine, and by the way, that medicine is on the World Health Organization's list of top 100 medicines. It's been out 60 years. The 3 things that testing needs to reveal are, first, that it's safe, no adverse effects. Secondly, that it's effective. And thirdly, preferably, that it's affordable. Now, this medicine has been out for so long, it is affordable. Now, is it effective? It's very, very effective. We've seen that in countries that are using it, in states within India that are using it, in countries in Africa that are using it. We've seen that it stops the virus in its tracks. And not only does it cure it in a matter of hours sometimes, but it also prevents people getting it. It's a prophylactic. So it's a treatment, it's a cure, and it's a prophylactic. But the World Health Organization won't talk about it. Suppressors talk about it. The Therapeutic Goods Administration in this country approved this particular medicine back in 2013. I used it in 2014. And the TGA won't approve it for use with COVID, even though it's proven, even though they've had papers written about it, medical papers, scientific, peer-reviewed papers, hailing its success in treating COVID. Not only that, we know of a doctor, a very well-known doctor around the world, internationally famous, who has given it to 24 patients very ill in quarantine, a COVID quarantine. All of them quickly recovered. 2 people didn't take it, they died. So this medicine, this wonderful medicine, it's on the World Health Organization's list of top 100 medicines, has not been used. Not only that, Morgan, it's been prevented from being used in this country. Prevented deliberately by the TGA. So this is the first time in the world that we've got a proven, safe, effective medicine being withheld from sick people. That is inhuman. That is wrong. It's completely immoral. Well, at the same time...
Yeah, sorry, Malcolm. I totally agree with your sentiments, and to a lot of people it makes no sense, especially the decision from the TGA to restrict the off-label prescription of that medicine, specifically in relation to treating COVID-19. So, of course, when something does not make logical sense, we begin to think, well, what was the basis for making the decision? And I know that opens up a whole can of worms, but do you have any thoughts in regards to that?
I certainly do. And that opposition comes from, for example, the TGA. I mean, the Therapeutic Goods Administration is supposed to be helping us get safe, effective, affordable treatments for people for a variety of conditions and diseases. The Therapeutic Goods Administration wrote me a strongly worded letter implying that it would take action against me because they said I was, in their eyes, advertising this particular medicine. What I was doing was having a conversation with my constituents. I'm here, as you said exactly, and very few politicians understand this, to listen to the people, speak up for the people, and speak on behalf of the people, and work for the people to serve the people. Therapeutic Goods Administration tried to shut me down. What I did was say to them, go to hell, because I am working for the people. How dare you try and interfere with my work for the people? And by the way, the government has blood on its hands. So the Therapeutic Goods Administration went away. It's just a bully outfit. It
Yeah,
tried
well,
to
I
bully
think
me
that
and
it should
didn't
be
work.
the basic rights of Australians to try to try different medications and to have this conversation with their doctors in relation to the risks and whether that's some type of alternative COVID treatment or a vaccine. So when I look at some of the decisions made by the government and the TG, I tend to ask myself who stands to benefit the most. I look at some of the pharmaceutical corporations in the world and I think to myself, they've hit the jackpot. All of a sudden, they have a new market of billions of people that believe they need to consume their products not once but multiple times per year, and they have governments around the world and mainstream media taking care of their marketing for them. They don't have to spend a cent. So I dare say the shareholders of some of these corporations are laughing all the way to the bank. So maybe just a bit of a question for you in relation to
Yeah,
Big
well,
Pharma. Do they have some sort of clout in Australian politics?
without a doubt, Big Pharma donated around $500,000 to the Liberal Party in the last federal election in 2019. Big Pharma donated $400,000 to the Labor Party in the same election. But not only that, the reason I talked about that wonder medicine that has been proven over 60 years is because if that was in place in this country, there would be no need for the vaccines. Now, I'm agreeing with you. That relationship between doctor and patient is sacrosanct, and it should be up to the doctor in consultation with the patient in consultation with the doctor to make up his or her mind what the treatment is. There should be a variety of treatments on offer. And if people want to choose the vaccine, go to it. If people don't want to choose the vaccine, that's fine by me. I'm not going to criticize you for your choice. If people want to use this other wonderful medicine that's been proven, then go for it. If you don't want to use it, that's fine by me. So if you have a look at that, if that medicine was in place, people would not be using the vaccines anywhere like what they are doing, not at all, because the medicine is safe and effective, and it stops prevention. It prevents contracting the virus. Now, if we look at these vaccines, first of all, they're only provisionally approved. They haven't undergone full testing. They have not had testing that could have been done on the female reproduction system, on the intergenerational effects. What happens to the kids? Will the kids be sterilized? Will the kids have some defects with them? Will the kids have some shortened lifespan? We don't know. So they could have done those tests. They haven't. The government is relying upon the foreign vaccine manufacturers for their verdict on their own vaccines. Now, if you look at Pfizer, for example, according to the Wall Street Journal, which in my opinion is, if not the best, one of the very best newspapers in the world, it's known for its accuracy. Pfizer is reportedly, in the Wall Street Journal, made $18.9 billion in revenue for the last quarter, the last 3 months. It made an estimated $4 billion in profit. Pfizer introduced, about 18 months ago, a medication for dealing with cardiomyocarditis, which is one of the adverse effects of the vaccine. So here we have Pfizer now making tons of money, billions of dollars, and they're making people sick, some people sick with that vaccine, and then they're treating them to get them healthy again from the adverse effects of the vaccine. Pfizer also makes a recently approved anti-blood clotting treatment, which can rectify the problems with the AstraZeneca blood clotting, possibly. Pfizer's making money out of AstraZeneca's adverse effects. So what we've seen here is a massive multinational pharmaceutical company making money off making people sick and making people healthy again or treating that condition. We also see AstraZeneca is made by Vaccitech. Now, Vaccitech is owned in part by, I think 12% of Vaccitech is owned by Alphabet. Alphabet owns Google and YouTube. YouTube will shut you down, and they have done it to me, if you mention the name of this medicine. That's why I'm being very careful for your sake. Because so what we've seen is the owners of YouTube also own Vaccitech, which makes AstraZeneca, and if this particular medicine was on the market in Australia, as it should be, then AstraZeneca would have much less sales. So we can see enormous conflicts of interest. We can also see that the Therapeutic Goods Administration gets its money from charging fees for big pharma to test and approve its products. We also know that the final decision of the Therapeutic Goods Administration is made by a committee of senior academics, senior medical academics at some of the top universities in our country. Where do they get their grant money, Morgan? They get it from big pharma. And so what you can see is enormous conflicts of interest. And we've recently come across another study which has documented the Therapeutic Goods Administration's conflicts of interest, and we'll be chasing that more particularly. But what we can see is that these vaccines are causing enormous side effects, adverse effects on people. And so this is the first time in our history where a government has knowingly injected something that can kill people, certainly cause adverse effects into people, into healthy people. So they're withholding treatment of a proven, safe, affordable medicine to sick people, and they're injecting people with something that has serious side effects in many people, and in causing healthy people to be sick.
And that leads me to another question, if I may, Malcolm. I read the TGA COVID-19 weekly safety report, and I see a few data sets in there that I think are misleading. For example, the TGA will publish the total number of doses administered and then the total number of adverse event reports received. Okay, so the key word, reports received. And I did the math, and if you were to work out the adverse events reported and received by the TGA versus the total number of doses given, it's point something of a percent, whereas we know from broader studies the likelihood of some type of adverse event following immunization is a lot higher. Even by Unvaxed safety, that only records data after 3 days, and we know that adverse events can happen far beyond 3 days. The rate of adverse event following immunization is more like 45%. So one of my really grave concerns is that by publishing these safety reports in what I would describe in a misleading nature, Australian would-be vaccine consumers, or people who are forced to take the jab or lose their job, they're not getting a full picture of what the actual likelihood is of experiencing some sort of adverse event. And you'd figure that absolutely flies in the face of informed consent. So what do you make about all that?
I happen to agree with you. I think they're being well underreported, way underreported. I was talking with a doctor who's done some study into this the other day, and he said that in Europe they've had 30,000 deaths. In America, they've reported, as of a month ago, I think, about 13,000 deaths, 1,500 or 1,000 or 1,500 miscarriages, Bell's palsy, a number of heart conditions, a number of respiratory conditions as adverse effects from these vaccines. And also, we're being told by nurses, and this is only anecdotal, but for what it's worth, anecdotally, nurses tell us, doctors tell us, that the number and seriousness of adverse effects is seriously underreported. And what was the other point I was going to mention there? I can't remember what it was, but the adverse effects are chronically being underreported, and that's right. I recently got a call from someone in central Queensland, in fact, a member of the state parliament, Steve Andrew, and he was telling me of 3 deaths that he knows of and 2 strokes, people admitted to hospital for strokes. And one person who died was a nurse. Anyway, he knows of these 5 people with serious adverse effects from the vaccine, and they got them around about 14 days after their second injection. So there's a lot of questions. There is a lot of questions to be asked here.
There's a lot of questions to be asked, and unfortunately for a lot of Australians, they may not be asking these questions if all they do is listen to the mainstream media. But I look at it like this, Malcolm. Even by the reporting standards of the TGA, and I suppose I'd have to say standards in inverted commas, what we see is drastically more deaths reported post-vaccination as opposed to deaths reported post positive COVID test, and I talk about the test on the show all the time, and that's probably a topic for another day. So the question that I'm asking you is, now that we know a lot more about this virus, SARS coronavirus 2, than as opposed to what we knew at the start of 2020, we all thought it was very dangerous. It was going to go and kill everyone. How is the government still able to sell this promise of freedom based on a vaccine that only has provisional approval, whereby the proof is in the pudding in relation to COVID deaths, or specifically the minuscule chance of somebody truly dying from COVID? How are they getting away with it, and why do you think so many people are buying it?
Well, I've listed, there are many different reasons why people either reject or accept the vaccination. Let's just have a look at 5 different categories that I've put people into. So the first category is the people who say, quick, get it into me, inject me. Okay, they're vaccine compliant. Good luck. I'm not criticizing them. They want to do that. That's fine. That's their choice, and I'm not going to criticize them. The next one is, Morgan, I don't really want to do it. I'm not feeling very well about this vaccine, but I want to go and see my grandmother. I want to go to do my job because my employer said I must be vaccinated. So therefore, I'm being coerced into it. I'm vaccine reluctant. The first one is vaccine compliant. This one is vaccine reluctant. The next one is, there are a lot of uneasy feelings I have in this vaccine. Look at the adverse effects. Maybe in a few years, but I'm not going to do it now. That person is vaccine hesitant. Good luck to them. That's their choice. Then the next one is vaccine resistant. They're opposed to vaccines unless proven otherwise. And so there are quite a few of them. And then there are the vaccine opponents, the 5th category. They're the people who just oppose vaccines. Well, that's their choice too. I'm not responsible for them. That's their choice. It doesn't matter where you are on that. That's your choice, based on, hopefully, on informed consent. But what we've seen now is initially some vaccine compliant, added to by many vaccine reluctant. There are many people who are saying that they're reluctant to get the vaccine, but they have to get it because they've been coerced. When you take something away from someone, like basic human rights, and then you say, if you want your rights back, get the vaccine, that's coercion. And when you say to people, you have a choice now. You either take the vaccine or you starve, because we're going to put this vaccine passport, and I call it a vaccine prison. We're going to put that in position on people where they can eat in a restaurant. They can't get into the restaurant unless they get a vaccine, unless they get vaccinated. They can't go into a supermarket unless they get vaccinated. Morgan, what you're saying there to someone is, you want to eat, you get a vaccine. That is inhuman. That's the basis of human life, existence, eating. Or you can say to someone, you've got some kids. You want to put food on your kids' table. Well, you will go and get vaccinated, or you won't get a job. You won't be able to afford your food. This is inhuman. It's immoral. And the federal government cannot vaccinate. Cannot compulsorily vaccinate.
Absolutely, and it is immoral. And I look at the system the government's implementing now, and it reminds me of the social credit system rolled out in China. I really don't see much difference between it. Yet the fear campaign of the government has really, I suppose, herded a lot of people into a state of compliance, where many people will be happy if they can get anything back. Here in Victoria, the Premier Daniel Andrews has announced freedoms, so-called freedoms for the fully vaccinated. They can now sit in a park with 4 of their friends, and it's like feeding back little breadcrumbs to people who have had everything taken from them. And we have a tremendous data set that's available to all humans that have a free internet connection to strongly suggest that the chances of surviving a SARS coronavirus 2 infection are beyond 99%. And the government is not actually recognizing this demonstrated statistic, and instead fanning the flames of fear, division, the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. Malcolm, there was a protest in Melbourne where people were protesting against the Cho directions, And in the apartment buildings above, people were opening their windows and throwing boiling water down on the protesters and screaming, "You're the reason why my kids kept out of school. You're the reason why we're in lockdown." And I'm really concerned about the polarization in our country. Do you see anything like that from your neck of the woods?
Yes, we do. We're starting to see some people talk about the unvaxxed as being inferior, but that is exactly as you said. It is a separation technique. It is part of it goes along with all the other control measures, the censorship, the coercion, the separation, they're control measures. And always beneath control, there is fear, Morgan, always. And so what we then ask is, why is the government afraid? The government is afraid of the truth. The truth never fears questioning. The truth loves questioning because the truth, if something is found to be wrong, is corrected, and that means truth is restored and retained. If something is wrong, then it's corrected. If something is correct, it's confirmed. And that's why it's so important to question. That's a fundamental of democracy. It's a fundamental of civilized societies. It's a fundamental of mature relationships. It's a fundamental of science. It's a fundamental of progress. And the government is afraid of all of them. And what I've noticed is that the federal parliament is an absolute disgrace because they don't ask the basic questions. They go to the second or third or fourth question and they miss the first one. The first question is, should we be doing something? The question that follows after that is, if yes, then how do we do it? What the government has been doing, Labor and Liberal, is going straight to the second question. How do we vaccinate? How do we change our energy sector? How do we try and fix climate? They should be asking up front, what is needed to address these, if anything? Now, if you look at COVID, it's exactly as you said. Now, COVID can be serious. It kills some people. I'm not doubting that.
Yeah,
but
same
it's
here.
a very small percentage of people are vulnerable to COVID. Those with comorbidities, those who are old, and quite often the healthy elderly are not affected seriously. Those who have obesity, those who have comorbidities, those whose immune systems are compromised. So, okay, that means, first of all, that you have to stratify those people, separate those people and treat them separately, but treat them with the best possible medicines you have, which is that IV medicine. Now, the other thing is that I asked for the chief health officer, I asked the chief medical officer for the federal government for the data characterizing the virus. And I asked him specifically for the transmissibility, how easy it is to convey from one person to another, and the severity. His own diagram came back with high transmissibility, not as high as Spanish flu and some other flus, and low to moderate severity. Not severe, not high severity, low to moderate severity, lower than some past flus, Morgan. So what that tells you is we've got this completely wrong. We shouldn't be locking down everyone and causing health problems for everyone, mental health problems, physical health problems, kids not getting sunlight, kids not getting exercise. We've also got people putting off cancer treatments, which will kill them at an earlier time. So we have got future medical problems coming our way. We've got current medical problems because of these lockdowns, mental health problems. We've got a vastly increased suicide rate and attempted suicide rate. This is not a positive effect. In America, Governor DeSantis in Florida invoked a lockdown early on when COVID came in. Now, remember that Florida has very high proportion of elderly people. It's where people in America go to retire. Governor DeSantis invoked a lockdown in Florida. Then during that lockdown, very early on, he said, my apologies, completely mistaken. We will never have another lockdown. It has a superior performance against COVID than California, which has been in perpetual lockdown. If you look across the United States, you've got 50 states. That's a large population, and it's possible to compare states with lockdowns and states without lockdowns. The lockdowns do not show any benefit at all, and enormous side effects, enormous adverse effects from lockdowns. And as I said a little while ago, even the corrupt, crooked, incompetent, dishonest World Health Organization says that a lockdown is only to be used initially to get control of a virus. So everyone who's using a lockdown is admitting they're not getting control of their virus. They haven't got control. And after 18 months, with all the evidence we now need, we could have a plan. We should have a plan. I've tested it with the federal government, the main strategies. They're still not doing it, even though they've agreed that the 7 strategies are what's needed as part of a plan.
Well, that's exactly right, Malcolm, and that's why many people have taken the position that they don't believe these measures are truly about a virus. Now, let me ask you another question. We spoke about those who are vulnerable to COVID, right? The immunocompromised, comorbidities, elderly people, or people who have other health complications. We understand that. Why is the government refusing to acknowledge those details, and why is the government refusing to acknowledge what an accurate infection mortality rate is of this virus?
It's about control, Morgan. There's nothing else that needs to be said. It is about control. Right throughout history, you started talking about human with this podcast. Right throughout history, we have the control. We have the competition between control and freedom. It's always been control versus freedom. It's within each of us to control others sometimes, but we actually thrive, and we thrive in ourselves when we give people freedom. I've got a list of 8 key aspects required for human progress. The number 1 is freedom. Number 1 is freedom, and the freedom to come up with something and come up with an idea, to then share that idea, to expand that idea, to refine that idea. That's where we have these things. Mobile phones, a remarkable device. We didn't even have them 13 years ago. That's where we've got so many innovations today that make our life easier, safer, longer, healthier, more comfortable, more efficient. And we have so many more options now. But we also have that control versus freedom in governments, because some people, some individuals, like to impose their control, whether it's for ego, whether it's for power, whether it's for money. They want to leech off others, sponge off others, be parasites of others. That's why some people are held slaves. So what we've got now is we've got some people wanting that control over others, and we've got the majority of people who are caring, honest, competent, and just want to get on with their lives. And because they're caring and they believe in freedom and they're honest, they can't see that other people are like that they want to control. So we have then a few power-crazy people wanting to control others for their own benefit, for the benefit of their mates, for the benefit of their party's donors. That's what drives this. The other thing that drives it, Morgan, is incompetence, gross incompetence. I can see all through Parliament that so many policies these days are not based on data, not based on objective facts. They're based on looking after vested interest, looking after donors, looking after getting a headline, looking good for the next election, looking good, not doing good. And they're based on opinions and shallow opinions, lack of thought. As I said, they go to the second question, how to do something, how should we do something, rather than the first question, should we be doing anything? So there's a lot of incompetence. There's a lot of fear amongst politicians. Politicians, in my opinion, generally lack the strength of character needed for leadership. Strength of character is the number 1 trait for leadership. Strength of character involves saying things like, Morgan, I'm sorry, I don't know. Can you help me? Morgan, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. My apologies. Morgan, can you give me the answer to this question? Morgan, can you help me, please? These are fundamental things. Morgan, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Politicians don't seem to be able to do that. Yet that's fundamental. Basic humans.
Thank you very much for that insight, Malcolm. And now, finally, I wanted to speak to you about protest. Here in Melbourne today, at the time of this interview, which is the 21st of September, we've seen 2 days in a row of huge protests in Melbourne, led by people in the construction industry. My estimate from today is that there's 15,000 people on the streets of Melbourne.
Wow.
And my prediction is that number will swell dramatically as the week continues. Now, I know that you have also attended and spoken at protests that were held for freedom, and I know that you're actually on record thanking protesters for standing up for their democratic rights. Now, some of your colleagues may label you as irresponsible for attending such a protest and also for thanking protesters. Would you like to respond to people that have labelled you as such?
Yes, I've got no problem with people protecting their basic human rights. These rights have been stolen from us under false pretenses. And it is the government that is at fault here, state, government, and in this case, the federal government has promoted this nonsense from the states. It has funded this nonsense from the states. We have the people being treated with complete disrespect. They're not being told the truth. They're not being given the best treatment in the world. They're not being given the best plan in the world. They're not being given any plan. They're being told lies. They're being told fabrications. We had the health minister up here, Yvette Dath, asked at a press conference in January, I think it was this year, Brisbane had 3 cases of COVID. So the whole state had to wear masks, And at the media conference, one of the journalists asked the health minister, well, Minister, do people driving alone in their cars have to wear masks? And she looked puzzled. Yes, was the startled answer. There was no consideration, no getting to the facts, no looking to an aide saying, can you give me the data on this? No, I'm sorry, I don't know. Let me go away and come back to you with an answer. That decision was made on the run. That shows no respect whatsoever for the people. When governments abuse people, when governments are stealing from people, in the world's largest wealth transfer ever from the taxpayers to big pharma for billions of dollars for something that is not proven, not fully tested, provisionally approved only, then the citizens have a right to be affronted because they've been treated without any respect, dignity, and courtesy. And that means that they should express their sentiments in a protest. That is completely fine because we have not seen anything come out of these protests. And what's more, and anything more, we haven't seen anything come out of these protests in terms of super spreading. What's more, the Premier of Queensland invited people to attend the Black Lives Matter rally last year, 30,000 people. We have people not clamping down on the Black Lives Matter rallies, but clamping down on protests against the government. That shows that the government is at fault here. The government is not acting consistently. The government is acting capriciously. This is a massive propaganda campaign, and its hallmarks are separation, us versus them, getting 2 separate bodies, massive propaganda, many lies, and ultimately to seek control. And the people have a right and a duty to protest that. I have a right and a duty to talk about that wonderful medicine that is being denied to the people that I represent in Parliament. I have a right to speak about that, and I do speak about it, but I can't speak on social media about it. I can't speak on your program about it. Not because you're a control freak, but because you'll get punished for it. You're not a control freak. The control freaks are in the Parliament. And what we have to do is recognise that ultimately the people responsible for this abhorrent behaviour by Premier Dan Andrews, Premier Palaszczuk, Prime Minister Scott Morrison, Premier Gladys Berejiklian are the people. Because we have let both the tired old parties, Labor and Liberal, control these parliaments because people just vote either informally or don't vote, or they don't think about their vote and they just go Labor or Liberal. And under that circumstance, the 2 tired old parties have taken Parliament and abused the people with the Parliament. The Parliaments now do not serve the people serve the Parliament. And we've got to change that because ultimately, the only people who can have any say on this ultimately are the voters. For goodness sake, I urge your voters to think when they vote, to vote for someone other than Labor and Liberal. I'm not telling you who to vote for, that's your business. But vote for candidates with character, strength of character. Vote for candidates with good values. Vote for candidates with decent policies who are consistent on policies, and look at their past record and see what they've done in Parliament. If they haven't been consistent, get rid of them. Because at the moment, Morgan, there's a fundamental truism. It goes something like this. In a totalitarian dictatorship, the people are scared of the government. In a true democracy, the government is scared of the people. Here, the people are scared of the government. We need to make government scared of the people. And the only way to do that is to get parliamentary accountability back. And the only way to do that is for the real sovereigns of our country, the people themselves, the voters, to vote properly, vote sensibly, and vote every damn election, and vote with commitment and interest. Do your research.
Absolutely, and I I echo your sentiments, Malcolm. Now, before we wrap it up, there are thousands of people heading to the tens of thousands on the street of Melbourne, people who believe they've been ignored, and I know that they've been ignored, absolutely. I'm one of them. And before we end the show, is there a message that you would like to share with the people of Melbourne and Victoria?
Yes, first of all, to the protesters, thank you very much for what you're doing. You're drawing attention to the lies, the corruption, and the policies that are costing us lives, costing people their lives. So thank you very much. It takes a lot to stand up to a dictator like Dan Andrews, who has been lying about this COVID, exaggerating it, all for control purposes. So thank you, first of all. Secondly, look after your families. That's the fundamental structure of human civilization, is the family. The second fundamental organizational structure of the human civilization is the nation state. A nation state is being destroyed by many forces outside our country and within our country. Stand strong with our nation, and as I said before, vote. If you want to get your freedoms back, vote. If you want to get your freedoms back, protest, because politicians respond to pressure from voters.
Malcolm, thank you so much for your time. We're very honoured to have you on MCJ Report. We're supporting you, we're behind you, and we hope to have you back on the show really soon.
I'd love to be. Thank you very much, Morgan. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.